Good morning, Vince. Nice to see you here this morning. And TR Hug. Not sure who that is, but welcome. Thanks for joining us this morning. Okay, as we start to get together here this morning, bring things up. Thanks for joining us here for our second attempt at the weekly campaign forum. The hope here is to promote discussion, introduce candidates, give them an opportunity to talk, get some questions, and then talk about a couple different issues that are facing the community this coming week. Okay, so we're a little bit early yet. We got a minute or two before we start, so let's sit back and take it easy. My campaign manager, Julia, suggests I play music, but I'm not quite sure how to do that just yet. So, you know, let the truth be told. Plus, music is challenging. I mean, I do have some great playlists here, so we could go with that for the time being. Good morning, Vince. How are you today? Glad to join us. You know, Vince is a candidate for city council, and I'm happy that he's been able to join us here this morning. Tom Hughes. Hi, nice to meet you. Tom, are you a resident or are you a candidate? I'm not familiar.
Resident.
Great. We're hoping to get more and more of you to participate in it. You know, our municipal elections are very, very important. I mean, it controls our schools, it controls our parks, it controls the city, and yet our turnout for these elections are very, very poor. So hoping that, you know, that we can spur, the goal here is to spur communications, get other candidates to come here and get a chance to do it. We're going to run this every week up until the election. I think our last one is April 2nd. And what this will do for us.
No, this is something else.
Oh, hi, Vince. I'm
Hi.
sorry what you were saying there. What's up?
Not too much. Just chugging along here. Been a good week, so.
I'm glad to hear it. I'm glad.
How about yourself?
You know, I think you know, it's we've lived in some tumultuous times here lately. You know, I'm hoping that really the spirit of this kind of situation is that give us a chance as a community to talk together, work through our problems in common, and see what's going on. Okay?
Yeah.
No, look, we got some other people joining us. Good morning, Roxanne. Thanks for joining us today. I'm going to give it a minute or two more, see if anybody starts, and then I'm going to open it up to candidates to talk a little bit. I expect that Allison will also be joining us this morning. There she is, just as I thought. Good morning, Allison. Welcome back. Welcome to our second go around here in the campaign forum. Nice to have it. We've got Allison. Allison is a candidate also for city council, as is Vince. So, you know, Vince, you were the first here this morning. Would you like to open up with a brief statement and tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're running for and why you're running? Good morning, Dominic.
You know, I'm going to do a lot of listening today because I'm still doing a lot of work. You know, I'm pretty much running on the platform of complete disclosure for the city of Naperville, and my byword or slogan or whatever you want to call it is going to be common sense. And we haven't used much of that lately, so I think that would be a good way to start the whole thing off. Let's everybody use a little common sense, be courteous and kind to each other, and share whatever's going on. So that's my message right now.
If you're not talking, mute yourself.
It looks like Julie's logged in twice. I don't know if that's causing the feedback. Somehow.
Okay, did mute there. Oh my. Okay. If I could ask anybody who's not speaking, that they mute themselves for the time being. Bear in mind that our production values are still an evolving thing. As this is, last week we started sort of on Facebook Live and realized that didn't work. This is good because we get the chance for people to interact and talk. But if you're not talking, okay, keep your microphone off. So Vince, I'm going to put it back to you and I'm going to do the same. I'll mute myself so we don't feedback. All right.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now? All right. I was just saying I'm going to do a lot of listening today. I'm running because, the community has not been involved and not allowed to be involved in a lot of the decisions that have been made. And I hope this will give us and the city an opportunity to communicate and use a little common sense and some courtesy and kindness towards each other. And with that, I'll turn it over to whoever's coming on next.
Okay, what I say, what the thought that I have here is we're going to do a few minutes of candidates. So Allison, if you just like to reintroduce yourself again, tell us a little bit about yourself. And then are there any other candidates here this morning? I mean, I don't necessarily recognize all the names. So if there is, please make yourself known to me. And then we'll go to some questions for the candidates. And then there's a couple discussion topics we have. So I'd like to move on for that. So Allison, to you.
All right. Hi, everyone. Allison Longva. Thanks for setting this up, Mark. And Vince, I'll have to say, I really do like your slogan. Common sense is something that we definitely need right now. So thumbs up on that. Good one. Lived in Naperville for 16 years. My husband and I moved out here to raise our family. I live in Park Addition, so I'm super close to the Fifth Avenue train station development. And that's what started having me go to city council meetings. And I advocated for the neighborhood, and then I just never stopped going. I really enjoyed going to the meetings, so have been going ever since. So I think the city has a few priorities right now. One is we've got to help residents transfer through to the post-COVID economy. We want them to transition successfully there. Like Vince said, we need to foster a more collaborative and specifically transparent development process, because we definitely did not see that in Fifth Avenue. And then we need to responsibly manage our tax dollars to deliver city services. I mean, Naperville is top on a lot of the list because we really do have great city services, and we need to continue that. So that's me. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Allison. Appreciate your comments. Hi, my name's Mark Urda, and like Vince and Allison, I'm also running for city council. I've been involved, why I'm involved. Who are you? Yeah, and here I was in the middle of that very well-rehearsed, memorized speech, and now I'm absolutely knocked off target. Why am I doing this? I'll be honest with you. About 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, Councilwoman Arbarski, who happens to be an attorney of mine, kind of beat me up because I was saying, well, this and all that, and you could do that. She said, oh yeah, well then get involved, do something. All right, if you want to be involved, get involved in the community. She had proposed, presented me to the city council, to the mayor, as an opportunity to sit on Historic Preservation Commission. And during that time, I discovered that I really, really enjoyed working with the residents and listening to their concerns and trying to bring and convey those to city council. I have to admit, though, that while my love of Naperville grew, my frustration with city council grew a little bit too. It seemed like we weren't able to get the resident message through on a regular basis. Okay, I'm running basically on the idea that I want to enhance the residents' communication into city council. I also want to promote, diversity in Naperville, and I share Allison and Vince's desire for increased transparency in terms of the things we're doing. When you don't know what's happening, you must fear the worst, okay? And this is definitely an issue that crosses over into some of the things, probably most predominantly the Naperville Development Partnership. I'm sure we'll have an opportunity in future meetings to go into that a little bit more. But in setting up this forum here today, the goal is for you have a chance to meet us one-to-one, and also to have an opportunity for you to ask the questions there and talk about our discussions. Now, we're trying to sneak this in at lunchtime. Okay, so enjoy your sandwich if you do, or take it. But we are going to try to sneak this in within a 30-40-minute type of time frame. Okay, remember, we'll be back next Friday. We'll be back all the way up until April 2nd, hoping to build more and more as we go along to bring it. My plea to everyone who's attending is, hey, please tell your neighbors about that. We've been outreaching pretty hard to Facebook and Nextdoor, and we're heartened that we're getting particularly, some non-candidates to be here, because your voice is why we're trying to do it. We want community input. We want you to know what you want. And with that, I'd like to open it up to any questions anybody has for Vince or Allison or myself this morning. So questions, anyone? Raise your hand. We'll see if we can do. I knew it'd be you, Marilyn. That's
yes. Well, I have something that sort of just is really bugging me this morning in terms of transparency. City council agendas come out on Wednesday. And generally that gives sort of a little less than a week to sort of figure out what's going on, look at the legislation. And I really hope everyone who is on council actually reads the legislation before they vote on it. That is, very core to me. And I'm not real happy to find out that there is, a change to the agenda. As of 11 a.m., it was not, it was not posted. I think it just got posted. And yet we have somebody on council encouraging people to vote against it, it's perfectly legal, for council members to add things to agenda. I think that's perfectly necessary. But that not only gives city council less of a time to review it, but that gives, the public even, less time, to review it. And this is not sort of the first instance of this. So I'm not beating up just on, this one issue. But I think council has gotten very politicized. I think a lot of things are, have been being done sort of in teamwork behind the scenes, and that is not in the public's best interest. I want independent thinkers. I don't want anyone who has like a lockstep agenda, in any partisan fashion, because it is theoretically a nonpartisan council, even though it doesn't necessarily behave that way. And, the more partisan it becomes, the less willing people are to participate. And I know, again, I want people who, on council who think, and, who are not just working in teams to pass legislation.
Well, Marilyn, can I ask you a question then? What would you recommend then? Would you recommend that, they don't make these last minute agenda changes, or what are your thoughts there? how would you like to see this resolved? I
think, for one thing, I don't think that anything, should be sent out, from council until I think that should be reserved for things that are really critical. I don't think that people should be encouraged to vote. And across the board, I'd rather have people not vote if they don't know what they're voting for, frankly. That goes to even people on council. I think I'd rather have them abstain, than voting for something without really understanding what it is. And procedurally, I don't know how you can change that. I think maybe slowing things down, rather than, pushing things so fast to council that, people don't even have time to adequately consider it. This recent issue is not the first one. There's just to put it out there. With the ethics ordinance, it shouldn't take a member of the public, namely me, to sort of find a gaping hole, in the way that's worded, and that makes me really worry, how much council is reading the legislation. And I suspect, I don't think there's any ill intent. I'm not trying to say that, that there's any, ill intent or, trying to sneak things by or anything like that. But again, it's procedural. And I think people, both the public and council, should slow things down and give people more time to actually think about what they're voting on.
Well, thank you, Marilyn. I really appreciate your input here. Any other questions for Allison or Vince or myself this morning? Don't be shy.
Or comments on what I just ranted?
Well, let's go with Dominic here for a second. Yes, that was no rant. That was, again,
Okay,
one of
thank
your
you.
informed inputs. I love it.
How about the candidates talk about that recent project that was approved along the train line? Views, impressions?
I'll be happy to talk about that. Okay, I really am. I mean, you're talking about the thing that happened here at 4th Avenue, right? Where they're taking the 4 houses, they're knocking them down, and they're putting up 13 units. Is that what you're talking about? They're putting in a private road coming in off of Loomis. As you can tell from my tone, I'm not enthusiastic about it, and I think it's one of the big concerns that we are going to have an issue that this is kind of focused in terms of the master plan. There were some discussions in the master plan, how we're going to deal with residential and what's going on here. I consider this plan a Trojan horse. I would use the words Becky Simon from Naperville Preservation, that what we are seeing happen here is rezoning by variance. Okay, the work that was done here in this R2 district is clearly R3 in nature, and by using the conditional use, I got to go back and say, first of all, Marilyn did a beautiful. She has this ability to make these maps that just show it so well. And if you looked at the map Marilyn showed, what that looks like in terms of the impact on living space and green space in that area, in terms of what it is, that density is just too high. And people might say, well, hey, it's in between the train tracks and all that. There's nothing like that in that area until now. So I was against it. I was disappointed by it. And I was kind of surprised because in the same meeting that approved that, the idea was presented by Councilman Kelly and Councilwoman Sullivan, working with the city's Allison Longva, about a new way to interpret the future land use there. And that basically they were saying that, hey, we're going to leave residential areas, alone, and we're going to focus this high density kind of stuff into undeveloped areas. I think that's right. I think that it's important to an owner, a property owner, to not be in a situation where all of a sudden they're going to find out somebody buys the 2 houses next door, and all of a sudden there's 5 townhouses or 8 townhouses next door. That's wrong, in my opinion. But I'm open to conversation. So, Dominic, I hope I answered your question there. Allison, Vince, any thoughts?
Yeah, Vince, I've got a few thoughts. One of those 4 houses is the house I grew up in on Loomis Street. And so guess what? Because I'm not as up to date on all the things that are happening, I didn't even know it had passed until somebody called me and told me, because, I get tired of listening. And what Marilyn said is so true, that, that may have been on the agenda, but it just was pushed through. And I don't know if the variances were approved or if there was any
Additional use and variances approved to do that.
They were approved at the same time. Now that's
just like Little Friends, exact same methodology.
Yeah, the same thing.
Exactly.
There's no input from the community. And whenever there's an issue like that, I, as a person that would be on the council, would immediately object to that and delay it for 2 or 3 meetings until we got input from the community and scheduled it for early in a meeting. And, let's make it transparent. Let's make it upfront and not push all these things through and have no conversation and have the zoning commission automatically approve everything, and everything is done before anybody sees or hears it. So anyway, I'm on my soap opera. but I think there's a lot.
We
Yeah.
love your soap opera. It's beautiful. For what it's worth. Marilyn, before I come back to you, I want to give Allison an opportunity to answer. I know she's
Sure.
really tight
Go
time
ahead.
this morning. I want to make that happen. Allison, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I don't like the process, but I mean, they do come before planning and zoning. So it's not like it is not a known issue. It's just that I think the residents don't know that they need to go to planning and zoning to see what's going on first. So it's like the whole sausage being made, that's where it's happening. It only comes to city council after there has been community input. And if community doesn't know, and I think that's the key, it's out there, it's public, but the community doesn't know it. So, I mean, I actually don't have a problem with there being some kind of townhomes there. I think 13 is way too many. That's just absurd. I mean, just normal, no variances or anything, you could have 8 townhomes there because you could have, it's R2, you could have 2 on each. So maybe if there was a compromise, you could say 10 maybe as a, we'll meet in the middle. I mean, my bigger issue, and I think the other council members' issue as well, was just seeing, I mean, there could be 26 garbage cans along Loomis on garbage day because that detail hasn't been worked out yet and they haven't thought about it. And that's just gonna look, it's gonna look awful. And then it could be a danger. Once kids start walking to school at Ellsworth, that's going to be a problem. And then once commuters start coming back, I don't know what time garbage comes through there, but I certainly wouldn't want to be trying to get to the train while the garbage is getting picked up. So that's my issue. But I think it's maybe from a council perspective, it's an education to residents that they need to be paying attention to planning and zoning. I was surprised that it went through so quickly and without any conflict. I was disappointed about that.
Well, thank you, Allison. Marilyn, did anybody, you had a comment you'd like to make? You're muted.
Marilyn, you're muted.
We'll ask him.
There we go. In that particular development, by conditional use alone, it would have doubled the density, which I think is fine. But it was the variances that more than tripled the density there. And I mean, staff was for it, planning and zoning was for it. There were some people who spoke up against it, but I mean, public input was was slow on there. And I think what is a real challenge, for people too, is I think within 300 feet of a property is where the public notices go out. And the city has been doing a much better job that, when, the week prior to a planning and zoning meeting, the presentation material is now put up there. You don't have to just wait till planning and zoning, but between public notice, and let's say it's a historic project, the HPC, between planning and zoning and city council, that development can change 4 times. So by the time it shows up as city council, it may not be a whole lot like what it was, the public notice went out for. And usually it gets more acceptable. Sometimes it doesn't change. But the fact that something can change from the public notice through planning and zoning and the council is hard not only for, for residents, because you're constantly working on a moving target, but then the public comments that go before the PZC don't match what the proposal is when it ends up at city council. So I mean, that's a part of the process that I think could be more easily fixed. I mean, I think they get in there saying, when they're requesting variances, it'll be these variances plus anything else that we need to get this through. And that by that extra little statement, that means that it can go from 47 to 45 down to 41, townhomes, as in the case of Kroller Mansion. And people have to play catch up. And I mean, we have a Naperville Development Partnership. We don't have like any kind of residential support to even understand, the zoning code and how to get stuff, how to understand when something is coming near you, what you need to do and how you need to present it if you're disturbed by a development. I mean, there's no support there.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions for candidates before we turn to some of our discussion topics this morning? There, by the way, under reactions, there's a, if you see at the bottom under reactions, there's a raise your hand. So since we can't see everybody and not everybody's using camera, if you want to raise your hand for a question, I'll be happy to try to facilitate getting you an answer. Okay, having said that and seeing no additional raised hands, I think it's time to move on. We do have a couple very interesting things coming before the Planning and Zoning Commission this week. And one of them is the Islamic Center of Naperville. Wondering, are you very familiar with that in terms of what's going on? It's a really significant development on the south side that has some concerns. It looks like a very good development long-term. It's a 5-phase process. However, like any time you're putting in a very large project, the concerns of the neighborhoods have to be heard. And this is where we're hearing a lot of concerns. The access to this facility currently is pretty much a little 2-lane country road. Okay. And the two-lane country road called 248. Now, in fairness, the city is aware of that issue, and they're working on that. They are in the engineering phase. They're in the very first phase of engineering on that. And their intent is to upgrade 248 to a 5-lane highway with, 2 lanes each direction, a center turn lane. So having said that, any conversation about Islamic Center of Naperville, my one big concern here is that what I would hate to see happen here is that this not be argued on terms of the impact on the residents, the neighborhood, traffic, and that this be some kind of backlash, or an anti-Muslim type of thing. Naperville, we're better than that, and I hope that it doesn't go that way, okay? This will be happening Thursday at Planning and Zoning. Okay, any thoughts or comments about that? Okay. Stay tuned. It's going to be a big deal. Okay.
Okay, Mark, have you heard anything from any of the residents down in the?
I've talked to both sides, Jules. I talked to. I've got some input from Tallgrass Homeowners Association members in terms of it, and their concerns are the concerns of anybody who is looking at a big development coming up in their neighborhood. Now, Julie, I mean, I know you know the area as a realtor, you've been down that way, and 248 is not a very big road. This is a fairly large complex. It's good. It reminds me a lot of Calvary Temple, which is on Route 59. Very big parking lot. A lot of the neighborhood concerns are first traffic, and second of all, there's just some issues associated with the aesthetics of what it's going to like to have this big parking lot there. Those are legitimate concerns, and I think we'll get a very good airing of those at Planning and Zoning. I know that Tallgrass Homeowners Association this week issued a letter to the Homeowners Association stating their opposition to the plan as is. And to Marilyn's point, okay, that things change and evolve over time. That's absolutely true. And this process of being involved with planning and zoning is the right place to get engaged on these kind of projects. Now, having said that, on the other side of the coin, and talking to the people associated with the Islamic Center of Naperville, they've been an extremely good positive force here in Naperville. They've done a lot of different things. They're spread out across a whole bunch of stuff right now. And this area was originally zoned for a religious area, and then it switched over to go residential, and they couldn't get it done, and it's come back to religious. So I think it's a good thing for the community to work together to try to resolve whatever the legitimate issues are. I talked to also the city in particular. I went and talked to Bill Novak, who's the head of TED here in Naperville, about what their plans are. And I asked him specifically, Bill, do you think that we can solve that the traffic concerns can be resolved and this can be made a safe and functioning thing? He was absolutely confident that that was the case and that would be the direction. Now, having said that, his plan does say that improvement to that road is years away. Okay, they're waiting for some federal money in that area, and when they get it, that'll help them there. So I don't know if that answers the question, Jules, but that's basically it. Yes, it's the classic situation where it's like, hey, I don't want this really big development in my neighborhood, but yet it's a good thing for the community, you know? So we gotta, hopefully we can work together, which is the intent of what this meeting is to foment conversation to work towards a positive goal. Okay. Any other discussion on Islamic Center?
Mark, just in general, what we're just talking about, if you don't mind.
I don't, never.
We're every time we go through this, we don't know what the city's putting up, what our tax dollars are being expected. Does anybody have any estimate? We still don't know what the city had put into Little Friends. We know it's a done deal now, so the only thing we can do is look at how much the city contributed to this. How many of our tax dollars contributed to what's happening over it? We know that there was $450,000 given out of somewhere out of some budget to the city of Naperville, okay? But we don't know how much the developer's getting, how much their total costs are gonna be, and what our total costs are gonna be. And I think that, you know, that's the main thing that I would be on the council. I wanna know what we're paying for all this development as residents. And after it's completed, I think we should also have disclosure, you know, not only what it was expected, but what it actually cost the city of Naperville. You know, we have a $500 million budget and nobody has questioned any of that $500 million. You know, it just seems to flow. And the developers seem to make a lot of money and the citizens don't have any idea who's getting it, how much of it is contributed in our tax dollars. And that's my real concern about this whole procedure. Nobody knows and nobody will be told. So anyway, that's enough. Okay, go ahead.
No, thanks, Vince. I appreciate that. And yes, you know, I think a common theme of transparency is something that we've heard quite a bit. Okay, if there is no other discussion on Islamic Center in terms of what it is, I would encourage you, it is out on the city website under projects. It is on not the agenda page, as Allison showed me this morning for planning and zoning. It's just on the main page. Allison, you had something you want to say?
I put it in the chat. I put the link in the chat for this Zoom so that if anybody wants to go to the planning and zoning thing, but yeah, I don't see it on the agenda.
And that's wrong. And that's wrong too, isn't it? I mean, we're supposed to have the agenda for next Thursday's meeting should be up already, but maybe by the end of today. So we'll take a look. Okay, if there is no further discussion of that, I want to just briefly go to a different subject that was very interesting, which has to do with the Market Meadows, the addition, the change of the Market Meadows Shopping Center, potentially to eliminate what they call the part of the system. What do they call it? The open something portion of the hospital. There's a bunch of empty buildings in Market Meadows that are based in a courtyard, which they want to repurpose. And the intention there is to repurpose it by putting in a combination of retail in the front and storage in the back, okay? This was defeated in City Council when it was brought forward to City Council on December 1st, because, and I don't know exactly what this all means, but they were trying to make this happen via a mechanism called a text amendment. This has to do with a public unit development, and it was defeated on the basis of they were afraid that by accepting the text amendment, this would set a bad precedent because it could be amended in other ways going forward. So the overall plan, I don't know, do we have anybody who is from that neighborhood that has any thoughts about this change here at Market Meadows?
Being familiar with what's right behind it, which are a townhome development that is impacted in some ways by the by just the truck traffic from Jewel, and that I'm really hesitant about that, about this whole thing, about the storage unit behind there. I just feel like that's just again downgrading that area and those townhomes will be impacted by more industrial traffic.
What do you think about the idea, though, that, you know, that the existing stores there are 97% empty? And
I
that,
know.
yeah, you know, and that this courtyard thing, and that, you know, that it's taking on the look of way too many of the strip malls that we have that have vacancies in it. I initially, when I heard storage facility, I was like, that sounds like a bad idea to put there, but the plans are actually quite nice. They did a really good job. It blends very well. It's only a 35-foot frontage, which is replacing the courtyard area, and all the storage is internal. Okay, it's not like, you know, those storage places where you got the rows and rows and rows of things and all that. That's all internal to the system. All access in and out of it would be internal too. So actually looking at the plans, I find myself in favor of this development in terms of it. But I also shared what council did there, resisting the precedent to change this via text amendment, which could easily be changed, and taking it through the full planning and zoning process, getting the public input and getting it there. So the reason I mentioned it for today's topic is it's timely, because we're going to deal with it on Thursday. And that if there is issues, this is the time to get people aware this is happening. I think this is kind of to Vince's point, that people don't know what's going on. And this gives us a chance. I'm hoping that this forum will give us a chance to look ahead and look at, you know, agenda items that are coming up, and also look back at, you know, for example, next week we have a council meeting. Part of our conversation next week probably will deal with some of the items that are coming up in council. Okay. Allison, I saw you shaking your head. It looks like you might want to say something about this.
No, I agree with you. When I was watching the December 1st meeting, I didn't really have any problem with it. It sounded like they were going to limit the times where people could come in and access it. It didn't sound bad, but I agree that the process of it should be done in the right way. And so if that's what it takes, then that's what we should do. I do have to wonder, like, so we have these forums, and obviously we are running for office. So we as candidates are trying to learn as much as we can about the entire process of how the city works. And what you mentioned at the beginning, and your question to Marilyn, was how can it be improved from a council perspective? I mean, the council gets these things after they've gone through planning and zoning. And obviously that's when we, as just plain old residents, learn about it. But is there something that can be done so that there's a better partnership between council and planning and zoning? Or does planning and zoning need to do a better job of advertising what it is they're doing? Or as council members, do we need to do that? So I think it's an open question for all of us. We are obviously right now going to be very aware of everything, because we need to be as candidates. Who knows what we're going to be asked. But going forward, I think it's definitely a question for the council as a whole.
Absolutely. I'm enthusiastic. I'm in agreement with you there. I think that really my hope is that if elected to city council, that we'll keep the forum, this concept open, that we have a channel that is directed to the public. I'm hoping that, like I said, what really I'm hoping to get is, let's continue to build the community involvement. We have 10 more weeks before the election, but in a very short time, I think, in 40 days or so, early voting by mail already starts. And not that long after that, in March, the actual early voting, you know, by going to the early voting centers starts. So we want to be out there. We want to get people's involvement. I'm asking those of you who are residents here, you know, to talk to your friends and neighbors and get them to participate. Ask us the tough questions. We may not have the answers, but you certainly have the right to ask them, and we'll try to get those answers for you. Okay, that's the important part, and that's what we really want to achieve here. We want to be transparent in our communication. We want to work forward towards keeping Naperville the greatest community, I think, in the country. I really do believe that. I think we're united in our love of our city, and I think we're united in the idea that we want to keep it great. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Or otherwise, I think, you know, I look at that, Allison, I think I'm pulling it in under the right under the 45-minute window.
Good job, Mark.
You know, well, that's it. Well, you know, your help has made us have a little bit of focus. I think it went better today. What do you think?
I agree.
Great. Well, listen, if there are no other questions, all I want to say is thank you very much for everyone for participating today. I hope you go back and talk to your friends, get them involved. We really need the input from the community. You know, it's a very difficult time for us, the candidates, to reach you because of COVID. We can't come really knock on your doors as we would do in the bygone era. So in our own little way, we're trying to knock on your virtual door here. Open this door to us, open it to your friends, get us involved. Get informed, get involved, and vote. Thank you. And thank you again for attending this morning. We'll see you again next week, I hope. Bring your friends. Ask tough questions. Don't be shy. You know, we may not have good answers, but man, we'd like to hear good questions. All right. And for that, all right. Well, goodbye now. Thanks, everyone.